Hi there, friends. Welcome to episode 64 of Knit Talk with a Tech Editor. I'm Megan of the Unapologetic Knitter, and I'm a tech editor. Today, we are into March somehow already, and I just feel like everything got a little chaotic between the skunkening that we had 2 weeks ago and today. Like, I don't even have my plant hung up behind me. It's in the sink getting watered right now. The vacuum is going, so please bear with me if there's a lot of background noise. I'm going to try to filter it all out. Thank you for everybody who left comments about the skunk experience. It made me giggle so much to know that we were not alone. There was one especially who ended up going into work after getting hit with a skunk, and they were nose blind, and they were only aware of it because of their coworkers. I have to admit, I laughed really hard at that. So thank you all so much for sharing those experiences with me. Today, though, we are finally going to be talking about compound raglan shaping for broad shoulders. As with every video that I do when I talk about making modifications, I just want to qualify that I am not someone with broad shoulders. I actually have quite narrow shoulders. So I'm speaking from a perspective of geometry and construction and grading and just understanding how the math all has to work. So for those of you with broad shoulders, I come to you very humbly with my very limited experience in my own body, and I encourage you to seek out other pieces of information or other resources that can sort of help fill out the information that I'm going to give to you today. I'm not the only name in the game. I'm just sharing with you what I know, and I hope that it will be really helpful for you. So as I was doing some research on raglan shaping, just in general, trying to learn the history of it, I discovered, and I guess I'm not that surprised, I discovered that raglan is a name. So there was a gentleman way back in the 1800s, and I have to look at my screen to see this, Fitzroy James Henry Somerset, who was named as the Baron Raglan. Raglan is actually a village in the community of Monmouthshire. I hope I'm saying that right. It's in Wales, in any case. So Raglan is the name of an individual. Baron Raglan, Fitzroy James Somerset, lost an arm during the Battle of Waterloo back in 1815. And so in many cases, you'll see pictures of him with his arm, or rather the sleeve of his garment, tucked into his jacket because there's no arm there. So his tailor, an individual who has remained unnamed, I could not find any information about him, actually developed the raglan shaping for Baron Raglan. So just to be clear, the tailor created it, but it was named after Baron Raglan. So what they decided or discovered is that creating that raglan seam that runs from the neckline edge all the way down to the underarm of a garment allowed for a lot more mobility than a traditional set-in sleeve style garment. So he created the raglan garment for Baron Raglan, and it kind of became the new shape in sporting goods and, of course, in knitwear. I think the only thing that makes me giggle about the whole history of all of this is Baron Raglan was not named Baron Raglan when he lost his arm. He was named Baron Raglan in 1852, but lost his arm in 1815. So there's like a 37-year gap before his name even became Raglan. So what I did not discover is at what time in his lifespan that the shape of the garment was created. All that to say, there's history about it. It's kind of neat. Sounds like he wasn't a super great dude, but we have the information now. So let's actually talk about the raglan sweater and the construction of it and how we can modify it for broad shoulders. So over some of my previous videos leading up to this week, I wore the Pop Your Color sweater that I designed for UU Yarns. It is a top-down traditional style raglan. It does have compound shaping in it, but not for shoulder shaping. We use it at the underarms rather. So When we talk about raglans, I will talk about it in the sense of traditional, meaning shaping consistently down a raglan line, versus compound raglan shaping. And I will largely be talking about it from a perspective of top down, meaning we're working increases to shape the yoke. But I just want to clarify that you can do the same shaping that I'm going to talk to you about today from the bottom up, in which case you'll be working decreases instead of increases. And you can also work this flat. You can work each piece, so the front, the sleeves, and the back separately, and seam them together and still achieve the same effect. We're just simply going to simplify and talk about the we're not going to talk about pop your color, but just from the perspective of a top down in the round raglan. Okay, so let's just take a moment to define what a raglan sweater is, now that we know who the guy is. So a raglan sweater is simply a garment that is constructed with a seam line or a raglan column that extends from your neckline edge to your underarm. The shaping is created by working increases in each quadrant of the sweater. And when I say quadrant, I mean the front, one sleeve, the back, and the other sleeve. Each one of those will be a quadrant. So we create the raglan shaping by working increases on either side in each quadrant to shape things. The more consistent your shaping is, the straighter that raglan column is. And that is what I think of as the traditional raglan seam. That angle remains consistent throughout the entire length of the yoke. So the diagonal angle, the raglan angle that kind of epitomizes a raglan is usually a line that is about 45 degrees from neckline to underarm. Now, I just want to blow your minds for a minute because I had to stop and think about this. It's not actually 45 degrees. If our stitches were square, that angle would be 45 degrees. But because our stitches are actually wider than they are tall, we're not creating an angle that is exactly 45 degrees. Now, depending on your stitch to row gauge ratio, this number will vary. But when I put my Pop Your Color sweater down and actually pulled out my protractor, which I have here, it turns out that my angle is around 51 or 52 degrees. Did I go online and figure out what the geometric formula was to determine that? Yes, I did. and so that mathematical formula of my stitch to row gauge ratio confirmed that that angle is about 50. It actually said 52.5 degrees. So protractors and knitting are not perfect. I guess I should say the protractor is perfect, but the knitting itself is not perfect. I've worn this sweater, so things could be pulled askew. Anyway, all that to say, it's not 45 degrees. Because it's not 45 degrees, the top of your sleeve is not horizontal. It is going to have an angle to it. And so for a lot of people, that angle pretty closely mirrors the slope of a shoulder. So for example, when I measured my sweater, that angle for me at the top, because my angle was around 51 degrees, is around 12 degrees. The slope of my shoulder is actually around 16 degrees. And I actually got up and traced the angle of my shoulder against a piece of paper on the wall to make sure, to see how close we were. So the angle of my shoulder is around 16 degrees. Now, a 4-degree difference is different. It's not the exact same, but because knitting is stretchy, it works for a lot of bodies. But if you have really broad shoulders, the slope is going to probably be a lot flatter. And that angle created by the raglan, which is not 45 degrees, is going to make it more constricting on your shoulders. It's going to want to pull down across your shoulders when it needs to sit flatter for your body. So just to clarify this, a standard raglan, as I see it, is a raglan style garment where an increase round is worked every other round throughout the entirety of the yoke shaping. It's alternating with a knit even round where no increases are worked. The shaping is consistent in its angle all the way down the length of the yoke, which allows the angle of the top of the sleeve to remain consistent. As I mentioned just a moment ago, depending on your stitch to row gauge ratio, the angle of your raglan will vary, but it's likely going to be somewhere between 50 and 55 degrees, and therefore your resulting top of shoulder angle is going to be somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees. In compound raglan shaping, we work a different rate of shaping in the front and back of the garment than we do in the sleeves. So, for example, to create a flatter top of shoulder, we will work every round increases, that's our compound raglan shaping, on the front and back of the garment to create a flatter angle. The sleeves will continue their every other round shaping, So the angle of shaping during the compound raglan is quite a bit flatter, and then the angle after the compound raglan shaping will become more vertical because the spacing of the increases rounds will not be as compact. So for folks with wider shoulders, this flatter rate of shaping at the top of the raglan is what is going to make the garment fit you better. It does take a little bit of work to adjust a raglan pattern for compound raglan shaping if it's not already included. It can be done, it's a little time consuming, and we have to be conscious of the pattern that you're working from. If you've got a really, I don't want to say basic because I don't think of stockinette stitch as basic, but if you have a very unpatterned or untextured raglan, this is a far easier change to make than if you've got a yoke that has color work or textural stitches that require a specific number of stitches. So I'm going to assume that you're here for the knowledge to know what needs to happen, and we're not going to worry about the complication of stitch patterns. We're going to assume that the following example is worked similarly to the Pop Your Color, where it is stockinette stitch and we have control over where we're working our shaping. So one more time to kind of belabor the point of a standard raglan increase, let's take a zoomed in look at what that looks like. For this example, we're going to say that our yoke is 50 rounds long. Now, if you are working from an existing pattern, what you're going to have to do to find this number is go into the yoke instructions and count up all of the rounds or rows that you will need to use to create your target yoke depth. This can be time consuming, but if you're looking to modify a garment for fit, it's definitely worth it. We're also going to say for this example that we need to have 25 increase rounds worked over that target yoke depth. So because we're working a standard raglan shaping, we're going to work 25 increase rounds evenly all the way down the yoke, meaning we'll work an increase round followed by a knit even round where we work no increases. Because we work 2 stitches increased per round per quadrant, each increase round adds 8 stitches. So in total, we will increase 200 stitches. So it's important to know that the same rate of shaping is worked in the front of the garment as it is in the sleeve. On an increase round, you're going to increase on each side of your raglan panel at the same rate. This also means that the slope of the top of your sleeve is consistent down the entire length of the sleeve from shoulder to cuff. I always find an example that I can visualize is helpful. So I think of raglan as a bit of a car drive. So a standard raglan, you are cruising down the road, you've got your cruise control set, you're doing the exact same speed all the way down the highway. You're doing the same thing with your increases. You're doing them the exact same rate all the way down the yoke. Now let's look at a compound raglan shaping. We're going to assume that we have the exact same target length of 50 rounds and the exact same target of 25 increase rounds over those 50 rounds. Because we need to increase the rate of shaping in the front and back and not the sleeves, we're going to work a different rate of shaping in each section. For this example, and this is not based in reality, these are just numbers that we can easily figure out the math with, we're going to say we need to work 6 rounds of compound shaping at the top of the yoke. Because we're working the compound raglan shaping in the front of the body only, we will use up 6 rounds because we're working every round shaping and increase 12 stitches in both the front and back of the yoke. Because our target is to have a total of 25 increase rounds and we've already used 6, we have to work 19 more increase rounds down the length of our yoke. Because our target yoke depth was 50 rounds and we only used 6 to work those first 6 compound raglan shaping rounds in the body, we still have to achieve 44 more rounds. So because we have 19 increase rounds and 44 rounds over which to work it, our rate of shaping in the body is going to change. We're going to work a combination of increases at 3 round intervals and 2 round intervals. I did the math separately, so you don't have to worry about this, but we end up doing 6 rounds of 3 interval increases, meaning we will work an increase round followed by 2 rounds even 6 times. And then we will work 13 rounds at a 2 round spacing, meaning we will work an increase round followed by 1 even round. So we now know that we have increased 19 more times. We worked 6 rounds at a 3 interval spacing and 13 rounds at a 2 interval spacing, and we have used up all 44 of those rounds. In the sleeves, we're going to stay at our consistent every other round sleeve shaping. We don't need to add extra shaping into the sleeve to accommodate the slope of the front and back of the garment. So we will still work the every other round shaping all the way down the length of the sleeve. The shaping at the top of the sleeve will result in being flatter because of the shaping that we added to the front and back. The resulting slope of the armhole below the compound raglan will be steeper. It'll be closer to vertical because we have more even rounds between our interval of shaping. So if we go back to our really simple example of using a car as a relationship between how we are working our shaping, we want to think of the top of the raglan on the front and back as like you've got the pedal to the metal. You're going as fast as you can, meaning you're increasing at a rate as fast as you can, meaning every round that you work, you're going to be increasing. Then we want to slow it down because we passed a cop with a radar trap. So we're going to work fast, 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 and then slow it way down, meaning as we go vertical, we want to work the most rounds in between our increase rounds. So in this case, because we know that our remaining 19 increase rounds have to be worked over 44 rounds, we have intervals of 3 round spacing and 2 round spacing. So we're going to go slower, meaning more space. So immediately after the compound, we will work our 3 round intervals down as far as we can, and as far as the math will allow, I should say, and then we will go back to our 2 row shaping for the remaining. What you end up with is a bit of an S or a Z shape. There's my Canadian coming out. Z shape as we go fast, slow, fast. So you're really trying to create that S shape to mimic your shoulders, the vertical drop of your armholes, and then the final where we increase our rate of shaping again is what's going to curve up under our arms. So the number of rounds that you work at that increased interval where you work them every round is going to differ based on your body. The ideal would be to work it so that your final every round increase ends roughly at the width of your shoulders. How long this length is varies based on your cross shoulder width, but also the width of your neckline. So the wider your neckline is, which is the flat part across the top and back of your raglan, the narrower or the fewer rounds you'll have to work at that increased level. If you have a really fitted neckline, such as in the pop your collars garment where we have a nice tight close collar, you would want to work more. So the length of it is going to depend on your row gauge and the difference in the neckline width and your shoulder width. So just before I recorded this episode, someone left a comment on my skunk video in preparation for today's video. Their comment said, "I keep thinking a compound raglan is essentially a saddle shoulder that has curves. Could you discuss the differences? I know a saddle or true set-in sleeve is more tailored. It seems to me the compound raglan is just a relaxed saddle." And I love this because it forces you to reframe how you think about the shaping. A true saddle shoulder has absolutely no shaping in the top of the shoulder. It is knit even. So if you say that the top of the shoulder between your two raglans is 10 stitches on a true saddle, those 10 stitches will be true until you get to the edge where the garment starts to go vertical. In a raglan, we do want to continue increasing stitches for the shoulder in that section. So that's the biggest difference. But I do think you could call a raglan with this compound shaping in it kind of a lazy saddle. And now I really want to play with that concept because I think that's really clever. In theory, I haven't practiced this, but in theory, to make it more saddle-esque, you could simply knit these stitches where you work the compound shaping even. Don't work any increases in there. It simply means that your rate of shaping down the sleeve once you get to that fall-off point of the shoulder would have to be higher. So there we go. I like that. So yes, thank you for leaving that comment. I think that's brilliant and forces us to reframe how we think about how shaping works in garments. So over the last few videos, when I have been teasing this video coming, there have been a lot of questions about raglan. And it's interesting to me that when all of us are introduced to knitting sweaters, many of us are told, myself included, that raglan is the easiest because you just knit in the round and add stitches until it's the right size. But what is the right size? If you haven't had the time to learn how to separate your sleeves or figure out the dimensions of your body, how do you get it to fit? So there are going to be more videos about raglan coming. Most specifically, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to talk about the measurements you need to take on your body to get the ideal yoke depth on a raglan. This was a question that someone else had posited, and I think it's a really great one because it's not a known value on a lot of bodies. Even I, when I learned it, was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. So we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks' time. Before I sign off today, I just want to tease one little thing out there. I am going to be hosting a fun Learn to Knit coming up in just a couple of weeks. We're going to knit a summer top. So keep your eyes peeled. If you're not already a subscriber to my newsletter, I have a link in the description below. You might want to sign up just so that you can make sure you don't miss any details. It's going to be a fun, free learning opportunity for you. Okay? Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I appreciate all your patience as you waited for this video. It's done, and I'm pleased that we got to learn this all together, including the fact that raglan actually has a castle. Here you go. So come on back in 2 weeks' time and we will talk more about raglans and my usual sign off. As always, my friends, thank you for being here and happy knitting.